In our studio in New York is Rachel Maddow. She is a radio talk show host on Air America. She airs 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. Rachel Maddow, what are you going to talk about tonight?
Well, Peter, I'm happy to talk about what's going on in the news. I mean, obviously, I like everybody, I'm as obsessed with the presidential race as everybody else, and so I talk about that every day. I talk about the war every day. But the news right now, this has been one of those summers that's been a real news blessing in the sense that you haven't had the usual, I think, the kind of dog days where nothing happens the way we do most summers. It kind of seems like politics are going full throttle even through these hot months. So it's been a pretty great time to be a talk radio host. There's been no shortage of things to talk about.
Okay, elections held today. Who are you going to vote for?
I'll probably vote for the Democrat. At this point,
the primary is held today.
If the primary was held today, I would probably cast my vote for John Edwards. But that said, I kind of feel like I'm a little agnostic among the Democratic candidates. The Democratic candidates right now are making the right kind of noises about Iraq. They're making the right kind of noises about the economic populist issues that I care about. They're making the right kind of noises, I think, about bringing the Democratic Party back to a position of strength in terms of standing up to the Republicans and holding people accountable for the wrongs that have happened during the Bush administration. I kind of like the way they sound right now, and so I've been much more fascinated with the Republican candidates because they're having so much more time, such a harder time, I think, getting traction. And so it's weird, I think, for a liberal talk show host, but I spend a lot more time talking about the Republicans than I do about the Democrats because I kind of feel like the Democrats are all fine. You even saw in their last debate this past weekend in Iowa, George Stephanopoulos falling all over himself to try to get them to fight with each other, and they all kind of agree. It's a very civil discourse on the Democratic side so far, and I'm fine with that right now.
Which Republican worries you? Who would you not like to see as the nominee?
Jeb. I have this theory that if we think about the Karl Roves and the other political minds that brought us 2 terms of George W. Bush, I can't imagine that those same forces that brought George W. Bush from his somewhat humble political beginnings to be a 2-term president, I can't really imagine that those same forces would be comfortable handing off the White House, making the next best hope for holding on to the White House for the Republican Party, somebody like Mitt Romney or Rudy Giuliani or a Newt Gingrich or any of the other kind of possibles among the Republicans. I just look at that field and I don't think this is just my liberal bias talking, but I feel like, and I think a lot of Republicans feel like, if you believe the polling numbers, that they haven't seen their candidate yet. So my conspiracy theory, and I admit that it's just a wacky, made-up conspiracy theory, is that they will medically retire Vice President Cheney, and then Jeb will have to come in just to serve out the end of Cheney's term as a favor to his brother, and then he'll be able to reluctantly run as an incumbent vice president. So that's been my big fear, because even though the Bush name is not the most popular one in politics right now, I think Jeb would be a much more attractive candidate than any of the other guys who are running right now. And as far as I can tell, he's not really doing anything. He doesn't seem busy. So Jeb, I think, would be tough. Condoleezza Rice would be tough. All the other guys who are actually in the race or fake not in the race, like Fred Thompson, don't worry me very much.
Rachel Maddow is a radio talk show host on Air America. We're going to put the numbers on the screen in case you want to dial in and have a conversation with her. How did you get involved with Air America, and when did you start broadcasting?
I came to radio through a circuitous path. I had been an activist for a long time. I was a Rhodes Scholar, and I was pursuing my doctorate in political science at Oxford. I had become an expert in a very obscure area of political policy, which is AIDS in prisons. I know, try to talk about that at a cocktail party. It's like immediately shuts down all form of human interaction. And I had been working with the ACLU and the National Minority AIDS Council and other groups like that. And I literally just started doing commercial morning radio in New England, kind of on a dare, as a lark. I tried out at an open audition, got hired on the spot, started the next day, and fell in love with radio at the age of 26, which is I think a little later than a lot of people get into it. I never went to broadcasting school or anything like that. I did morning radio in New England for a few years, ended up having my own pretty well-regarded morning show in Western New England. And then when Air America started, I just made a complete nuisance of myself and would not let them leave me alone. They were nice enough to give me an interview, but I went to great lengths. I had an ex-girlfriend who was in Al Franken's politics seminar at the Kennedy School at Harvard, and I had her stalk him at his office hours and give him my reel from my show. It was really embarrassing. But ultimately, Air America hired me as a newscaster and then as a co-host, and now I've been doing my own show on the network for a couple of years. And I guess someday I could imagine going back to just being an activist and being an advocate again, but I really like doing radio. I'm really in love with the medium. It's been great.
At rachelmaddow.com, this is how you describe yourself. Rachel has a doctorate in political science. She was a Rhodes Scholar. Background in HIV/AIDS activism, prison reform, and other lefty rabble-rousing. She shakes a mean cocktail, drives a bright red pickup, hates Coldplay, loves arguing with conservatives, spends a lot of money on Amtrak tickets, and dresses like a first grader. She lives in Western New York with her partner, artist Susan McCullough. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's right.
Who's your favorite conservative?
Oh, my favorite conservative. That's a great question. I think that there's a lot of conservatives who I get along with personally. I was on Tucker Carlson's television show on MSNBC for a year, and Tucker and I are friends, and I really enjoy him as a person. Pat Buchanan is someone who I enjoy as a person, although I think his ideas, particularly on race and immigration, are so frenetically bad for the country, I almost can't talk to him about them. There are a lot of people who I like personally, even though I disagree with them. But in terms of political respect and ideas that I like and things that engage me, I respect the idea of limited but effective government, the idea of that brought conservatives, that conservatives advertised themselves with for a very long time. I think of that as a classical conservative position, which is mostly about fiscal responsibility, and I think that that's become a very mainstream American concern in politics for good reason. I don't hear very many Republicans who are willing to distinguish between cost-effective government and just smaller government anymore, and so I don't find much in the modern American conservative movement that I feel like is something that would make the country better if it were really implemented.
Has Pat Buchanan been a guest on your show?
He has. Actually, he came in for what was supposed to be a 10-minute interview, and I ended up keeping him for a half an hour, which he didn't want to do. But it was about his last book, which is about immigration, and it was one of the worst interviews I had ever done. I think interviewing people who you personally like is dangerous because you end up trying to make them feel better about the interview rather than really getting something out of them. I think we saw that a little bit this weekend with some of the Karl Rove interviews on Sunday morning. But I was really hung up on one of the kind of basis of Pat's hypothesis about the country being overrun by the Mexican hordes, about being overrun by immigrants across our southern border. And I just felt like he gave about 15 different quantitative statements about how many immigrants there were in America and how many were coming, and it was like in The Manchurian Candidate when the Joe McCarthy character is railing about communists in the government, and every time he restates his communist in the government allegation, there's a different number of communists. I kind of feel like some of the anti-immigration activists and anti-immigration voices in the country do the same thing. You never really exactly know who these hordes are that they're referencing, but they seem to grow every time they need to add another exclamation point to the end of their allegation.
And finally, in your bio, there was also a stint with a jungle-themed company called Espresso Bongo, but she doesn't want to talk about it. What's that about?
I graduated from Stanford in 1994 with a degree in public policy, and I had an honors degree in ethics, and I graduated early, and I ended up applying to the Rhodes Scholar. I had kind of all this intense academic stuff going on in my life, and when I first moved to San Francisco, my first job was the opening shift for West Coast stockbrokers at a place called Espresso Bongo, where our most popular drink was a 5-shot latte. And it was, I think, the thing that convinced me more than ever that office life was never going to be was never going to be the thing for me. The soul-sucking look in the eye of all the people coming in for their 5-shot lattes in the morning was enough to put me off office work forever, I think.